maybe hydrogen or electric engines, of course. So, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I've got a wonderful panel of speakers for you this afternoon to talk about the hot topic when it comes to decarbonisation and the shift to carbon zero of commercial vehicles. Walking the halls, it's very clear that the manufacturers and the products are now taking shape and they're ready. So sorry guys, it's all down to you now. The focus is shifting on infrastructure, it's shifting to energy supply, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I've got, as I say, four wonderful speakers on the stage here with me. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes each just to introduce yourselves. We're going to start with Roel Vissers from this new CV Charging Europe company, the JV between some of the key manufacturers. I'm just about to give you your intro for you, so save you talking. But anyway, Roel, tell us a little bit about yourself and the organisation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, at first, thank you for having me here. Very excited to share our view on the future of infrastructure for this transition. So, Roel Vissers, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Public Affairs at CVCE. Well, don't worry, this is just a legal name and we will announce our sexy branding name in the future.
Can you give us a hint?
No, I cannot, sorry. I'm 9 weeks old at this company. The company is 9 weeks old, has been established on the 8th of July. And so founded, as you said, by Volvo Group, Traton and by Daimler Truck. In order to end the chicken and egg issue on battery electric trucks versus charging infrastructure. Well, I've been in the charging infrastructure for some years. Before I was the CFO of Halleløv, a charging solutions company. And now super excited to be part of this journey. Looking at also this session, our goal, the goal of our company is to show that electric heavy-duty trucking is possible, and actually we should start today.
Okay, thanks, Roel. So I think your flag is clearly on the mast of electrification. So let's move now to Susanne Goldammer from Linde. And I think you have a slightly different view, but we'll come on to the discussion shortly. But perhaps a little bit about yourself, Susanne.
Okay, thank you. I would like to start with a statement, and I see a zero emission target needs many contributors, and one will be hydrogen for sure. And Linde is the company I'm working for, and Linde is covering the whole value chain from production, liquefaction, distribution, application of hydrogen. And the Linde Hydrogen FuelTech is the company that is building, producing, developing and servicing the hydrogen fueling stations. And so we see there are all kind of gaseous hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, subcooled hydrogen, and we cover the whole portfolio. And we see a lot of advantages on that, and I hope that we talk about that today, that there are pros and cons and different use cases for all technologies, and it's very important to keep the technology open and at such an early stage.
Very good. Thank you, Susanne. So from let's call more startup, new fuel to legacy stuff. I know that you've got a whole new area of development coming from BP, but I think it's clear where your history is. So Alexandru, Eftimiu, you're the VP of Fleet Business for Europe. So a few words, if you don't mind.
Sure. And Andy, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel. It's actually a privilege. I mean, I was so happy when I saw the composition of the panel. It's kind of giving you reassurance. It's going to be a great discussion. And it's really a privilege to be in this company, looking forward to it. As you said, I'm leading the fleet business in Europe. It's a business that has the privilege to serve about 100,000 customers in Europe. So the legacy you spoke about, yeah, does manifest in that. We have deep roots into the mobility space, and we're privileged to work with some amazing customers. But those amazing customers actually expect us to act a lot like a startup. So, you know, we are at that place today. We've been actually launching a very exciting digital product this morning together with MAN at their booth. And I think in terms of energy, you know, looking forward to the conversation. But I think for us, the starting position is there is a role for so many energy vectors to play in this journey with regards to decarbonizing road transportation. So I guess the way I feel about it and the way I approach this conversation, I think it's more about partnering than anything else. Views and stakes to be taken probably for one energy type or another, but there's a big acknowledgement that we all have a role to play and an accountability, a responsibility to make it happen, which requires us to be open-minded to everything that can help the cause.
I think that's one of the key things that's emerging, certainly from my time at the fair this week, is that it's all about collaboration and partnership. So we'll definitely have that as one of our topics as we go through. So last but by no means least, I've got Christian Halleløv, head of eTransport at E.ON. Yeah, let's hear about you.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Thank you for having me, and yeah, also a pleasure on my side to be on this panel. Yeah, I'm the head of the eTransport business unit at E.ON, which is a relatively new business unit. E.ON has also come to a conclusion that this, how to say, the trend of going to a sustainable fuel for the heavy vehicles is also going to be a mega trend in the coming years, and we want to be a serious player in that field. We are currently working with charging solutions and charging services for electricity. So we are focusing on electric trucks at the moment, but we are not ruling hydrogen completely out of the picture, and therefore also by definition have, how to say, an agnostic approach to the technology. I have a background in e-mobility, so I started in e-mobility back in 2011, back when we truly believed that battery switch station technology was going to be the prevailing technology throughout. That proved not to be the case. Then over the years, things shifted towards 50 kilowatt charging, then 100 kilowatt charging, then 150, then 300. And now we're also looking into 350 and 400 kilowatt charging for electric cars. And I think it's safe to say that technology is just developing at such great speed, and I think it's going to be very difficult to actually have a clear view of how will this sustainable transport sector actually look like in just 5 years' time.
I think that, so it takes us nicely into the sort of, I feel like our first point of discussion. As you would expect, I sent the panel some briefing notes before today's session that were written at the weekend before I'd had a chance to visit the fair. And I was talking to Susanne this morning, and in it in the discussions and the sort of general feeling about what's going on in the industry, it really felt to me like electrification and charging had got the drop, had got the advantage, the first mover advantage over hydrogen. Having walked the halls over the last few days, my view has changed. I have to say my view is I'm completely confused, but it seems that it's not clear cut. We're certainly, for the short to medium term, we have to accept there's probably 4 power energy sources that are going to be available to market: biodiesel, gas, electric, as in charge points electric, and hydrogen. That's going to be a really confused position for everybody in the industry. As a journalist, we like to seek truth. We want to find a one answer. Let's have this discussion now. Let's get it out there as is there going to be a dominant energy source? Who wants to start? Susanne,
I would like to start, yeah. So because I liked in your briefing the questions, or the winner will take it all. And I think this brings it to the point, I don't think there will be a winner. There will be contributors all to the same target, and there will be different technologies to come to that target. And so there will be battery charging and there will be hydrogen fueling because there are different use cases, yeah? So it's depending on the infrastructure. So if you have the connecting power available, so there might be this the best solution, but there are also places where it's not possible. And then having the possibility to use the green energy directly going to an electrolyzer, going directly to a fueling station. So there are such solutions, locations that offer such solutions, and so I see all of that. But what about you?
Go on, Alex.
I think it's fair to say, as we said in the beginning, there's going to be a place for all the energy factors to play a role. For how long and what's going to be the share that they will account for, that's still probably the bit of, it's still probably not so clearly laid out, and probably that's the feeling you got visiting the fair also in the first days. But I think the way we hold it is there will definitely be transition fuels, and I think gas is definitely going to be a solution in the midterm. I think biofuels, it's something that we're all embracing, and we see actually the power of contributing to decarbonizing transportation today. But I think long term, we all agree hydrogen and EV will be the destination, and I think it's still out there to clarify at which pace will that actually happen. At BP, we issue every year a document called the Energy Outlook, which is the way we hold what's the latest view that we have in terms of energy transition and how different fuels will contribute to the road transportation and many other sectors. And it's not the way we wanted it to happen, it's actually the way we believe it's going to happen. That's also our contribution for the public debate. And with every yearly iteration, there is actually an update and shifts between the energy types we have just discussed. But the way we still hold it is in the short and medium term, there's a contribution that each can actually bring. Long term, there will be not a winner, but winners. And I think I agree with what Susanne just said. There will be solutions that will be better suitable for different use cases. Yeah.
Roel, you've got the support of the three, certainly Europe's biggest truck manufacturers pushing a particular view. What's your line in this?
I think it's not a surprise that we are pro battery truck vehicles. Walking down the fair, seeing all those electric trucks at all the OEMs, and not only our shareholders but everyone. Yeah, for me, it's obvious. To be clear, obviously, I think hydrogen will have a very important play in the future energy mix in the total zero-emission energy need of Europe, but I don't see a role in transportation. At least there might be a very small role in some specific use cases. But for me, it's clear that battery will be the winning technology. And just looking from a scientific point of view, to look at the well-to-wheel efficiency and see the fact that battery electric vehicles have 3 times the efficiency versus hydrogen vehicles, I don't see the point why, and that obviously is reflected in your operating cost and also your operating competitiveness versus diesel. I don't see a clear reason why one would prefer hydrogen above electric vehicles.
Okay, well, we'll come back to cost parity and TCO and all the operating applications in a second. I'm interested in your view on this, Christian. I think quite traditionally, E.ON is all about electric, but I think since you might be hedging your bets a little bit around hydrogen as well.
Yeah, I think if you're looking into the future and what battery electric can solve right now, I think hydrogen comes with 2 obvious answers to some of the limitations that battery electric currently have. Right? So with hydrogen, you can charge much faster and you get the long range for the vehicles, right? And those are 2, how to say, constraints that we currently have to deal with on the battery electric side. Now, what I currently do see, though, is that there seems to be far more investments and developments going into developing the battery electric technology, right? And I don't see hydrogen being, how to say, ready with, price attractive vehicles and infrastructure out there. So I also follow where are investments happening the fastest, where seems to be the focus of the main players in the market. And I think momentum is definitely with electric from that perspective. And if you just, where investments are the biggest, this is also where things will develop the fastest. So I think by the time where we will also see, how to say, attractively priced hydrogen vehicles being brought into the market, battery electric will actually have caught up quite a bit in terms of solving these 2 main issues that we currently see for this area. And I also have in the back of my mind, back in 2011, when Toyota was saying that they didn't believe in battery electric vehicles, they were going for hydrogen. And then because they also thought that hydrogen should solve these, I'd say, main issues. But over the years, at least for passenger cars, I think now Toyota has realized that they were wrong betting on hydrogen. So I follow also what is going on in the market, where economies of scale seem to be happening the fastest. But at the same time, I definitely acknowledge that with the large infrastructure for charging that we will have to build in order to meet charging requirements of the heavy trucks, for example, looking into megawatt charging, there will be some serious constraints on the grid that are very, very difficult to solve from a battery electric charging scenario. And therefore, in some areas, for some use cases, it could very well be that hydrogen is the best case to solve that. For example, also, if you look at countries where grid stability is not super well, where, adding megawatt charging solutions into the grid is just, simply impossible. There, hydrogen, I think, could be a perfect solution.
I think, and that's it's a very important point, isn't it, about the capacity of the grid and the charging infrastructure. And, we've got an energy crisis at the moment that sees in Germany the lights going out at night, and talk of now of power cuts as we go through the winter all over Europe. So where would that leads us back to in the direction of hydrogen, surely, Susanne?
Of course, this is one of our strongest arguments. Thank you to blame this back to me. And we have quite a number of examples. Yes, so you mentioned that we are switching off lights to save electric energy, but we also have cases in California where we have a strong hydrogen fueling station network, by the way, that in summer times, hot weather is coming, all people switch on air condition, and then people were asked to stop loading their Teslas. And so we hear a lot of such stories recently, and I think this is of course solvable. Yeah, so it will take time, it will take investments, and sometimes it will not even be possible without new power plants. And then still it's not green. And so therefore I think transporting hydrogen from places where it can be generated green, and there are discussions about having hydrogen from Australia, for instance, so it will be liquid hydrogen, and there is no way I can imagine to bring this via electricity to Europe, for instance. And this is a second limitation, yeah, so how to store it.
Roel.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear for everyone that we are in an energy crisis. It's clear for everyone that that we need more renewable energy, that we need to build a lot more renewable energy. But I still don't get the point. You need 3 times as much renewable energy to get to the same mileage of a truck if you would put it in a truck. So we are all clear that we need more, but why use it so inefficiently, and why don't put it directly in a truck?
And so your argument is use the hydrogen plant to create the electricity, but not on the vehicle, and or any form of.
I would use hydrogen in industry, where actually hydrogen is an input source for the actual chemical or industrial process, and not use it for, because the way how I look at hydrogen in a vehicle is simply we use hydrogen as a battery, because in the end hydrogen vehicles drive electric, like battery electric vehicles.
Alex?
Probably my only build would be, and I very much sympathize with what my colleague said before, I think the reason why we believe there will be destination fuels, and not one, but at least 2, it's because we have a time constraint, yeah? We need to go there within a certain time horizon. We cannot afford being purist about, what the science demonstrates to be the long-term winning solution. We have some things that we need to achieve by 2030, yeah? And we have an obligation to start now, yeah? We have to hit some milestones on the way to 2030. That's why I don't think that the world and Europe will be, in a luxurious position to choose one technology and go for it. If it really wants to live up to the commitments it made to 2030, you're going to actually have to mobilize everything that helps on the way there, right? So I don't think that this is just a technology-driven debate or a scientifically informed decision. I think it needs to be very much rooted into what our stakeholders want of us, and reducing the carbon footprint is the driving force. Yeah. So everything that adds up to that should be welcome and encouraged, as it is today. And that's why, we have a long-term conversation. But again, just making the point, biofuels and even gas, even if from a scientific point of view we discard them, that's factually the only solution at the moment, applicable at a certain scale to decarbonize road transportation. So I think we just have to contextualize everything and acknowledge we're on a race that has specific milestones that need to be delivered.
So let's forget about this argument of whether it's electric or hydrogen, and as we said, Susanne, winner takes all, except that there's a multiplicity of solutions. And then, so I'm guessing then we focus on the application.
Exactly.
And then, so let's just, probably most of the people that are dialing in and most of the people here are aware of where the application benefits are. But should we have a quick trot through that, just to sort of sense of where you believe that, I think Roel, you would say battery electric's good for everything, but I think there was a sort of general view that for short distance, known distances, regional operation, it lends itself to the duty cycle of electrification, but with hydrogen you've got that sort of more flexibility of being able to run pretty much wherever you need to, so you can replicate a diesel duty cycle. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's true, but it's not needed, right? It's holding to our old customs and wanting to have something to refuel and to keep to the current way of working in the logistics sector. In the end, you have the driving time law, and anyhow, every 4.5 hours you have to break. You have to take a break. So if you have the perfect infrastructure in place, which we will build, you can use that 45-minute break to charge. And already today, well, you can see that at the booths of the OEMs, we have battery electric trucks ready, and the charging technology ready to kind of do the longest long haul already battery electric. Well, I would say kind of today.
But I guess to Alex's point, the clock is ticking. We were talking about TikTok earlier. The clock is ticking, and can you get that infrastructure in place in time for 2040, 50? What's the view on this? Perhaps, Christian, let's have a word from you on infrastructure development. And I think now we've introduced the speed issue. It can't be done when we feel like it. It's got to be done when the politicians are telling us.
Yeah, I think it's a good question whether we can get it all in place in good time, right? Because, time is a key factor here, right? We are in a hurry to do this. We want to get rid of, basically fossil fuel transportation as quick as possible, right? But it's going to take time no matter what. And there's tons of things that are still missing to speed up the pace of what is going on. Right, we are starting to see the first attractive vehicles come on the roads or being produced, which is of course super great. But we need much more local incentives, the right political framework in each of the countries to speed up developments, road pricing, zero emission zones, things like that, to really, guide the decision makers of our customers and partners in the direction of actually creating also a consumer market that we can feed our business case into. This is going to take time. And on the other side, there's a ton of things that needs to be, upgraded in order to speed up also developments on the grid side, so we can sustain these massive grid integrations that need to take place, especially around megawatt charging. And this is, these things historically have proven to take quite a lot of time to really establish themselves in the market. So, but the pressure is on all of us to make this happen as soon as possible, right?
Is there enough, this might be a really obvious question, is there enough energy to do what we need to do in the time scale? Is the capacity there, whether it's the grid or with capability of hydrogen or
no
wind power? Or
the whole world is going electric, right? At least in many European countries, the consumption of energy is expected to double or quadruple over the next 10, 15 years, right? And so we need to also, push the development of offshore wind farms and solar energy production and all kinds of other renewable energy sources to actually feed all this added energy into our grids, while at the same time strengthening the grid so they can actually transport all this extra energy to all the right locations. And so this is a massive job that we have in front of us, all of us, right? And at the same time, we are, I mean, speed is a key factor here. Alex,
where do BP sit on this?
I think a great point has been made here. You know, the way we look at a business, the road transportation will double by 2040. So you're not just looking to migrate the current demand to a different type of energy, but it's going to be a double of that demand that you need to kind of cope with, yeah? And let's remind ourselves, certain type of energies will compete with other industry sectors. So I think the speed, acceleration, commitment, and investment into the new type of energies, I think wind and solar has been mentioned. I think that's probably where you know, a lot of the work that needs to be done in the next decade actually lies. Yeah. So just putting in the context, it's not about solving a problem with a constant of today. That constant actually will evolve, which is the demand bit. Yeah.
It feels like the political will. Obviously, the political will has created the time frame, but I guess we were discussing this earlier, that the politicians and the legislators have to understand what's at stake with an industry that feeds Europe. You know, most of the goods are moved by a road, particularly the consumer goods. I guess it's very important that the industry has these discussions and that we engage with the politicians to make sure, because if they take the wrong step in subsidies or in a direction of travel through a pronouncement of a new piece of legislation, the whole of the industrial supply chain will collapse. I know that sounds a bit dramatic, but this is what we're talking about at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, that is a bit dramatic indeed. Obviously there's a transition period, and the question also is, how long will this transition period be, right? Personally, I believe that the transition will happen much faster than everyone sees. Also because of looking at the logistic industry, it's all very much cost-driven. And if you look at the cost competitiveness, which is expected end of 24, early 25, then we see that the logistic industry is quite a binary market. I think the transition will go pretty fast. Limited, obviously, by, on the one hand, availability of battery electric trucks, on the other hand, obviously also on the use cases where we have the right public charging infrastructure. I think the question is, how long will this transition period be?
When on Tuesday, for those that were at the fair, the Daimler boss, Martin Damm, made a presentation, and as you're probably aware of this, there's three key hypotheses that makes carbon zero transportation possible. One is the product availability. We can see that at the fair. Two is infrastructure, pressure on, no pressure, pressure's on you guys. And then the third is cost parity. Where are we at in that? So let's assume that infrastructure, it feels like, with all due respect, Roel, we're going to have hydrogen in the mix. It's going to be part of the play. Where are we at then on cost parity before people can look at diesel and see? Damm, I think, takes a view that forget about cost parity. You're going to have to pay more for your transportation in this carbon zero world. What's the panel's view on that? Who wants to take it? Christian, I'm coming to you with this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's more expensive if you want to, have a battery electric truck and operate that compared to a diesel truck today. That is for sure. I live in Denmark, and it's around 2 to 3 times more expensive to buy an electric truck compared to a diesel truck, right? And then you have also the challenges about, I mean, many of these logistics and transport companies have a history of optimizing their logistics, like down to the minute, right? Really tracking optimization of loading, offloading, going from A to B in the most efficient way, and always, having this, all this data compiled so they can really optimize everything that they do. And now all of a sudden we want to introduce a technology where they are now having to, to sit and wait for an hour or two to charge their vehicles, which is something that completely ruins their optimization game. But what is super important is that it will go in that direction no matter what. There's so much political pressure in this direction, and there's, I would say, and also increasing consumer demand for sustainable transportation. And so it's very important that all these big companies actually get started now, start getting the experiences with these types of technologies, so they can actually also build a much better, how to say, position in terms of developing, understanding this technology, and also to how they should encompass these technologies into their operations going forward, so they can optimize again, but from a slightly different perspective compared to what they were used to. So it's super important that they get started, even though it's more expensive, more complicated than what they're used to, because in 5-10 years' time, their entire fleet will be, or 15 years, will be running on different fuels.
Alex?
Yeah, I would probably just add two things to it. We already see what power of the wheel can make in the short term. Yeah, we see customers out there that accept paying a premium for a more expensive means of transporting their goods on the road. Yeah, and we're really overwhelmed by that attitude. You know, our businesses that actually take a hit in their P&L, in their delivery, to actually make space for the adoption of these new technologies and pay their contribution to the decarbonization of the road transport. So we see actually people that flex actually the way they approach TCO and accept that in the short term there's going to be a hit before they will probably bounce back to what the current TCO is. And secondly, I think we are really very far from really making the best out of what we can get from digitalization. Yeah, I think the third theme, other than powertrains and energy supply in the fair, has been for me digitalization. There's a huge amount of companies that actually have their eyes into how can we optimize, continue to optimize. You know, we know Danish companies that are amazing at optimizing their operations, but you know, even they are not yet there in terms of making the most out of the data they produce. Yeah, and that's going to take different shapes. Yeah, obviously the North Star is going to be the autonomous vehicle and a different level of utilization of the asset itself. Yeah, but in the short term, the very cost of ownership can be further optimized and hence reduce the demand for energy by, you know, banking on the power of the data and the insights we all generate in the industry, whether it's suppliers of energy, OEMs, or even customers themselves. Yeah, so putting all that knowledge together, I think, can drive actually the efficiency down and deliver benefits for TCO that may make it more sustainable to move to another energy source, which per se might be more expensive in the short term.
Susanne?
Yeah, so I also see this as a critical factor, this TCO, and I would like to emphasize that we see that we have to see the whole picture. Yeah, so it's quite easy to compare on the truck only, but of course we always have to keep in mind the infrastructure. Only recently I read a study where it was said that the less contributing technology is going by train, because if you look at all the infrastructure, bridges and tracks and so, and you are counting the steel and the concrete, it will be the most, maybe it will be on the last place. Yeah, so, and I think this is something I miss a bit in the discussion, that we don't have really the full picture. Yeah, so and we just started to discuss the investment in infrastructure needed, and we need to see the whole picture. Yeah, so, and this is one point, and the other point is how we come to lowest possible TCO. So it's development, all technologies developing, batteries are developing, hydrogen fueling is developing, and I think we will be cost competitive to the benzene or diesel-driven cars. So I'm sure about that. Nevertheless, there are also other aspects. One is digitalization, but I also see standardization. The more differentiated the portfolio is, the higher are the costs in the system. And I see this is something that also can contribute, and you mentioned it, collaboration, and collaboration can lead to common standards on both technologies, and this will help as well. And we are far away from that at the moment.
We talk about so common standards and protocols, and
Yep.
you know, I think everybody's familiar. You know, there's 125 years of diesel fuel and infrastructure and vehicle development, and the protocols and standards that go around that. Are you confident as a panel that those standards and protocols are emerging for the new way of fueling and operating vehicles? And if not, what needs to be done?
Well, yeah, I think no, I think that's one of our concerns actually. I think it has two aspects. That's one as we all agree, the speed of rollout of infrastructure. In this case, even without taking a position in which infrastructure, but we need to. The government, the regulation should simplify and speed up the process of getting to permits and subsidies. So I think that's definitely something which should be there to actually make anything happen. But on the other part is the standardization on protocols. I think what we have seen in the passenger car market, it has become quite a jungle of companies trying to work together and not always succeeding. I think if we look to the trucking industry, then for us it's super important that that also to offer the reliability needed for the trucking industry, that the government also takes a role in the standardization to ensure decent infrastructure in the future.
Right. Susanne, we spoke about protocols. Anything to say on this? I think you'd want to see people working to common standards.
No, I fully agree to that, but I'm not sure if the government will help because of which country. Yeah, so it might be that it is necessary to agree on lower geographies. Yeah.
Because we have a different, we have a different
governments.
plug in the UK than Europe, and how do we avoid that happening? Has that work been done? Is that, Alex, has that been sorted?
No, but to be honest, I tend to take a positive approach on life. Why wouldn't it happen sooner or later? Yeah. Pushed by different stakeholders. I think we're always looking to the government, but I guess the industry players have a role to take on into that debate and push for that, you know, in an informed manner, explaining why there is a need for those common standards, you know. But I wouldn't see any reason why we would not get there.
Right.
I give it better chances than, you know, having the steering wheel on the same side of the
I still have to bring an adapter every time I come. It's ridiculous, isn't it? So, anyhow, enough of that. My next point. We talk about the promised land of carbon zero, whether it's hydrogen or electric, but there's a lot of goods to be moved across the world, but let's just focus on Europe, on diesel vehicles for now, for the foreseeable future. Well, it's only 3 to 5 years. Who's going to continue to invest in a diesel infrastructure when you know that from a long-term planning point of view, it's in phase out? Is anybody thinking about this? I'm thinking more from particularly BP, where you've got a legacy footprint. What's the thought process on that?
Look, from a certain point of view, it's really a historical moment because you said, you know, for 100 years we've been selling a certain type of fuel, and we've been actually welcoming all type of vehicles at one retail station. Yeah, they would come to those stations. They would be fitted to serve both trucks and passenger cars, and there would be a limited type of fuels that they would be made available with a given infrastructure. What happens now is that there is a shift. Yeah? So to provide many of these new energy types, actually, you need to invest and start up from the scratch. Actually, you know, many of the sites would not be suitable actually to take on a hydrogen tank, or they would not be able to supply the power that has been spoken about. You know, that you know, the charging power that would be required for the applications we've been talking today about. So there is a moment when these two infrastructure plays tend to go their separate ways. And you will see a lot of new investments that will be required. You know, it's going to be quite an interesting challenge to cope with because you have to find a place that really serves the industry best, but at the same time you have to make sure the energy would be available and you would be actually capable to ensure, you know, a secure and reliable type of energy provision on that side. which means that as you build a new one, obviously there will be sites and there will be places where the demand will drop, and there's no secret, divestments and investments happen day in, day out in our industry, yeah, and we're very much welcoming that. So there will be sites of today that will be decommissioned, and I think that's a process that will continue. It's going to just be an output of the energy transition we've been talking about. At the same time, even a bigger amount of money than the one that's being decommissioned will be committed to new sites that will provide these new energy types. So
Do you
it's
see
just
this
a continuum.
Is this so? We've seen it already. There's been an evolution of that with service stations closing as range and mileages have got better from diesel products. Is this a gradual transition, or we spoke earlier, Christian, about how they say innovation flows where the money goes. Let's say I'm concerned as a citizen that these old diesel fueling stations, or petrol fueling stations even worse, aren't going to be maintained, aren't going to be invested in as all the money shifts to electric and hydrogen.
I don't generally see that risk, yeah. So if I look into our own strategy, as we have pivoted from an oil company to an integrated energy company, one of the verticals, one of the 3 pillars in our strategy, is actually mobility and convenience. So those sites will continue to exist, and they will continue to exist to provide energy and also to provide the convenience offer that we put out there at the moment, yeah. I think the pace at which these things happen, it's what we're trying to review every year, and one may wonder if the year has not become too long of an interval now to review what's happening out there. But if you look into our latest energy outlook, you will see we're looking into 3 scenarios. It's one scenario which is called New Zero, the other one is accelerated and new momentum. So there is different paces at which we're anticipating these playing out, but there's no question that the infrastructure will undergo a massive reshuffling process along the lines we have discussed. Sites will close down, new sites will open. You see that happening right now, and there's a beauty with the new sites, and there's a challenge also in developing a new convenience offer that will fit the new type of consumers that will come there. For our industry, we don't speak enough about it, but there is an element we're very much conscious of and want to commit even more of our attention to, which is the driver's well-being. Yeah. Drivers, it's also, you keep talking about energy, end of the day there will be people for the foreseeable future that will come to pick it up. So our new sites will have to be respectful and offer a good experience to those drivers as well. So I think that's a shift, it's a historic shift, I would say.
It's one of the key things, isn't it? Because at the moment, a lot of the discussion on charge times or refueling is about replicating the current system. So get your charge time down as quickly as possible, or at the very minimum within a 45-minute driver's break. But is this the opportunity to look at it, to review that, to review those rest places? How do we avoid the queue for if everybody wants to charge at the same time? Any thoughts on that? Perhaps Christian and then Roel?
I think it's a good question. I mean, it's easy to imagine a future that is, how to say, similar in a certain way to where you're coming from, because that's what you know, right? But I mean, in terms of transporting goods and thinking it different, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, railroad and efficiencies around transporting goods super efficiently across Europe through, how to say, optimized railroad systems could also be something that should be, how to say, emphasized even more, and could be, how to say, something that would also, give the whole area another dimension of efficiency.
Roel, you guys are building 1,700 of these new sites.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us this is also an opportunity to, as we have to build new infrastructure because the current land allocations are not there, we also would like to take the opportunity to build a more convenient area for the drivers. And so we also feel like a moral obligation to take better care of our current drivers. Definitely looking at the current huge shortages in drivers in Europe. Actually, I'm not very surprised that we have those shortages if you look at how we treat those people, right? So, so that's an opportunity we definitely will take. I think changing the logistics system is, I would say, almost a mission impossible. I think the next big thing will be autonomous driving. But yeah, who knows what's the future on that?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think we're more or less out of time. I see the clock ticking down for the last 5 seconds. I think I'd like to say thank you to the panel. I think they deserve a round of applause from the audience here that's with us. This is a very tough topic. There's obviously lots of vested interest, but also it is the most important topic for freight transportation if we're going to solve, well, it's not about if, as we solve the carbon zero challenge. And you know, I said no pressure, but I think it does rest now with our infrastructure and energy providers to unlock the solutions for the future. So good luck. I'll see you back here in 2 years' time, and let's see how you're getting on. And hopefully, a lot of the issues that we talk about today have moved on, and I've no doubt there'll be a whole set of other challenges for us. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I think that's an excellent idea. Let's check back in 2 years' time and see where we are, because as Andy says, it's not a question of if we solve this challenge, but when. We are going to take a very, very short 13-minute break. At 3 o'clock, we are continuing with a keynote on megawatt charging systems for heavy commercial vehicles. Please join us then.